Hello, boys and girls. Mrs. Blackburn here for our poetry lesson this week. Learning goal is 5.10D. The student is expected to describe how the author's use of imagery, literal and figurative language, such as simile and metaphor, and sound devices achieve specific purposes. Your success criteria. After reading the poem To Travel, students will describe how the author uses figurative language to achieve specific purposes. Let's go ahead and look at our poem today. So, what I want you to do right now is to kind of look over this poem a little bit and maybe jot down some things that you think that this poem may be about. The title is To Travel. And you can see in the background, we have a really beautiful scenic view. The essential question is, what can our connections to the world teach us? You are going to read two poems about connecting with other cultures and with nature. So if you have a piece of paper and pencil, just kind of jot down some things that you think that this poem may be about. This would be a great place to pause the video and get some piece of paper and pencil if you don't have one. All right, so we're going to move on. As we're reading the poem, I want you to be trying to make some connection to the poetry. It's always important to try and connect to what the author has written. And then I also would like you to kind of try and take down some notes and even write down some interesting words. They could be words that you don't know, words that you think that you really like, maybe some words that you want to know more about.
To travel. To travel. This story is poetry. The poet loves to travel to distant lands through books and art. He explores new cultures. He learns about their food, art, music, and customs. What he learns enriches his life. Wild Blossoms. This story is narrative poetry. The author's grandmother sends her to town to buy flower seeds. The grandmother scatters the seeds around the backyard. The poet is surprised. She thought they would plant flowers row after row. The poet and her grandmother enjoy the birds and insects in their backyard. Soon they will have a meadow of flowers.
So there's a little background information about both of the poems before we begin. So let's go ahead and start. To travel. To travel, to travel, to visit distant places, to leave my corner of the world, to seek new names and faces. Adventure, adventure, exploring foreign lands. If I can leap across the globe, my universe expands. A novel waves her arms to me. Come read, she cries. Her pages dance with ancient tales, a feast for hungry eyes. The paintings on museum walls are begging me to tour. Leave your home and live our scenes, a grand exchange for sure. To travel through timeless books and art, I enter and experience a life so far apart. I sail across the seven seas. My heart soars like a bird. And soon I'm hearing languages I've never ever heard. Far across the seven seas, aromas fill the air. Foods I've never ever tried are eaten everywhere. Music blares a different tune, and strange new clothes are worn. Parents pass on customs to the young ones who are born. I've traveled, it's left me more aware, a valuable connection to the universe we share. By reading books and viewing art, I've learned a thing or two. The world was made not just for me, but made for me and you. Jad Abbas. Okay, so hopefully you wrote down a few things. Let's talk a little bit about the key details. They did mention them when we listened to the background information. This author is obviously the main idea here is traveling. When he says to travel to visit distant places, to how is he going to these different places? Very good. A novel waves her arm to me. Come read, she cries. Her pages dance with ancient tales. So, reading is how this person is traveling from place to place. And maybe you hadn't thought of that. Maybe if you can't physically go somewhere, you can learn about all kinds of different places and foods to eat and learn about different cultures from reading about them in a book. Excellent. All right. So as we wrap up this lesson, I want to talk a little bit about this word here, personification. Personification is what we discussed when we talked about figurative language. It is an element of figurative language and poetry. So I like to tell my students to look at this word person that's right in here. And if you think about that, personification is when you give human-like qualities to something that is not human. So when you go to Schoology today, I'm going to have you tell me what, in the second stanza, what describes the paintings and what the speaker want the speaker to do. What does this help you to know? So it's going to be about personification. I'm also going to have you answer this question here. What does the speaker think of reading books and viewing art? And then finally, when you get to your Schoology assignment, I'm going to ask you to look at author's craft, and that's about how the author writes the poetry. How does the poet use simile, a comparison using like or as, to show the speaker's feelings? So this is going to be looking at the way that the author has written the poetry. And I know this seems a lot like reading, but it is very much so connected to the writing and how the author wrote the poetry. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to your teachers. And that's it for our lesson today. I hope you have a wonderful day.